Good afternoon and welcome to our Oak Bend Medical Center Happy Hour podcast. My name is Donna and I am your host. I am very excited to introduce our guest today as we speak about fire safety during the winter season. For as long as he could remember, Chief Youngblood has been an admirer of firefighters and generally those who serve the public interest. His public service began when he joined as a volunteer firefighter EMT with the city of Stafford. Chief Youngblood worked for 21 years in Missouri City as a firefighter, police officer, paramedic, and arson investigator. He was promoted through the ranks to assistant fire chief in 2006. He retired on February 28, 2011, to begin his career in Richmond on March 1st, 2011, where he was hired as the fire chief. Chief Youngblood has enjoyed being the fire chief of Richmond for the last 9 years. Welcome, Chief Youngblood.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me today.
We are so excited to have you here because the one thing we know, the holidays are coming. And when the holidays come, it creates fire hazards a little bit more. We hear of fires a little bit more. We always want to do fire prevention, but the holidays seem to bring more. So with people frying turkeys and Christmas trees and electric heaters and fireplaces, tell us what we need to do to be safe.
Well, you're right. We do see an increase in volume of runs this time of year, especially we're moving into really two seasons. We're moving into the holiday season, but we're also in Texas, we're moving into a cooler weather. So it's usually the first time that heaters are starting up or fireplaces are starting. So I'll begin with be diligent about getting your services, your utilities checked by a professional to make sure everything's in working order, prior to initiating those units, fireplaces and heaters like that. And speaking of heaters, space heaters are a big contributor to fires around our area and across the nation. So it's recommended that you follow the guidelines of the manufacturer of space heaters, keep them away from combustibles and do not plug them into extension cords, plug them right into the wall sockets. But also regarding the holiday season, people like candles. They use candles maybe a little more, and sometimes that's around dried arrangements a little too close, and we're not necessarily thinking about those things. And of course, trees become hazards. There are bulbs and lighting that goes on those trees, and sometimes those create a hazard by becoming a little too warm for the tree that can become combustible. So, but one thing that people should really keep in mind, and just experience from being in the fire service a long time and also, dealing with a lot of these things over the years, is the holidays create a distraction. So therefore, many of us may not be attentive to our heaters and these type of things more than we would, because there are distractions around that time of year. So it's a good opportunity to sit and take time to share with your family, to turn things off, especially with lighted ornaments and things like that. You really do want to turn those off when they're unattended. So that would certainly be something to help staying safe this time of year.
Okay, great advice. Now, I'd like to touch on something that I probably have some personal knowledge of, and I hope I'm not the only person that didn't realize this, but we all hear about cleaning your dryer vents and those kind of things. But what about the exhaust fans? How dangerous could they be, and do they need to be cleaned?
Dryers, they can be a little bit tricky because some of these components are kind of hidden within the unit itself. But the dryer vent, you should at least inspect it about every 30 days. The lint catchers, they're not always the best for catching all the lint. And as the lint moves through the dryer or the exhaust vent or going to the exhaust vent, it can collect, especially if there are any bends or turns in the vent hose. So you want to try to clean those out. just like I said, inspect it about 30 days. But you probably want to do a cleaning about once a quarter. A lot of it depends on how often you use the dryer, the type of clothing thing that you're using in the dryer. But also it creates a little bit of static electricity as it goes through there as well, which can cause things to cling. And if you wash anything that has an adhesive to it, like maybe a rug or something like this, and I'm just speaking from experience, the things we found, sometimes those adhesives, when they're heated up in a dryer, they kind of become aerosolized and they collect inside the vent, and therefore any dust that comes there just creates kind of that adhesive through the vent as well. But you do want to try to inspect it at least every 30 days, just a visual inspection, but probably break it down and do a good cleaning about every quarter.
What about the vents in your bathroom, in the ceiling?
They've gotten better. The designs have gotten better, but still, a lot of the homes here were built in the 60s, even 50s, but in the 60s and the 70s is when you really start seeing those exhaust fans being put in, and some of those are still originals. But also, as they're exhausting fumes and vapors out of the air, they can pick up dust as well, especially if you use powders and things like that, and it'll collect up in there. So you want to try to inspect those. You can usually pop the cover off and see all the way up into the fan, and you want to kind of inspect those a little bit to make sure there's not stuff being collected in there. But one thing that we found is over time they wear out, and those little fan motors will hang up, but the motor's still running. So it heats up and it'll light up any combustibles around it. And sometimes that could be insulation or some dust that may be up there.
So would that give off a fume or anything maybe before it gets to that point? Or
I think as a general rule, you may be able to smell like a little electrical smell from some of those wires being heating up. But as a general rule, people don't notice it until the smoke detector goes off. Those smoke detectors are pretty sensitive, and you get a little bit of the smoke generating from that can set a smoke detector off, and even then, they're not really sure where it's coming from. So it's good to inspect those areas initially if your smoke detector goes off and you can't determine exactly where it's coming from.
what is the biggest fire hazard that you see that you wish you could tell people about and would prevent maybe some things?
The fire prevention theme for 2020 is cooking fires. That most of the fires in a residential setting are initiated through unattended cooking. And those have been increasing over the years. And that would be the call to, I would say, is that would be the greatest risk for the residential home is, and I use the word unattended. Usually if you're in the kitchen and you're kind of watching what you're cooking, whether it be in the stove or on a heating element on the top of the stove or in the oven, you usually can detect something going on. But when we get distracted, we go away from the kitchen, and then next thing you know, we're doing something else, maybe folding clothes, and kind of lose track of it. Those things can heat up and then start a fire. And then they kind of start a panic. So once you go in the kitchen, you see that your food's on fire or smoking up the room, and the smoke alarm's going off. You have to be really careful about how you plan to extinguish that fire if you attempt to do so. But I recommend going ahead and dialing 911, let somebody know that you have a problem and get the fire department on the way. And then if it's something that you can do intermittently, try to do that. But you always want to keep yourself safe.
What are some things that families can do in preparation or in prevention for a fire?
Initially, one of the most preventive ways is just be attentive to those things that we talk about. And there's many, you can go on the websites and find tips for creating a fire-safe home. And those are numerous. It tells you all kinds of ways. But some of the key ways are notice things around the home that could potentially become a fire hazard, and that's like extension cords or some of the surge protectors. You want to make sure you've got a good surge protector. But one key to help being safe is when you're not using an appliance, unplug it. You know, like appliances that may be on the counter, like a cooker or a coffee pot or a toaster. You want to just go ahead and unplug those. But probably the main assistance with helping to have a fire-safe home would come from having smoke detectors in every room and on every floor. And there's guidelines for installing those. And I know in Richmond, if any of the residents, citizens need assistance with determining how many smoke detectors they need or our installation, all they have to do is call our department and we provide that assistance for them. So that's probably the primary thing to help be fire safe. Because if you're asleep, it's been known that people can sleep right through a fire alarm. So if you have multiples, then that's a better chance of getting somebody alerted and get out. And the key thing to that is once you get out, you want to stay out. You don't want to go back and try to retrieve anything. And just let the fire department know if there's something in there they need to get, let them try to get that for you.
Great advice. What about carbon monoxide, like fire alarms and that kind of stuff? Are those good to have in your home?
Carbon monoxide detectors are very good. I can say from my career, some of the most tragic scenes that we were called on were when entire families were overcome by carbon monoxide in the home from either a faulty appliance that was generating heat and vapors and the fumes, or even leaving a car running in the garage. We get distracted, we'd get out of the car, we'd carry groceries in the house. Next thing you know, we shut the garage door and that car's still in there running. So those experiences warrant having carbon monoxide detectors in the home. And when it gets cold, your main source of heat should never be space heater or running some kind of appliance that could generate carbon monoxide. Like we have hurricane scares around here sometimes, and if you lose your power, you do not want to bring a generator inside the home. But having a carbon monoxide detector in conjunction with the smoke detectors is a great way to help prevent those types of things from happening or being caught in the thing. It may not prevent it from happening, but it helps you be alerted to the dangers when they're there. Carbon monoxide, you can't smell it. So it's a deadly gas and it can do its damage and you never even know it.
So I know we talked about a cooking fire that instead of trying to put it out, call 911. That'll be the best thing. What about fire extinguishers in the house?
Well, fire extinguishers are recommended for areas like the kitchen or the laundry room or the garage. And but the main thing is, do you have time to use it? And if you're going to use it, you want to be sure everyone in the house is proficient with how to use it and that it's visible, that you don't have to go looking for it. But if you attempt to use the fire extinguisher and you see that it's not working, just put it down and get out. But even before you begin to use the fire extinguisher, you or someone in the home should go ahead and alert the fire department that there's a problem and to be on the way. So I would say The key to that is if you're going to have a fire extinguisher, don't just buy it and set it down. You want to become proficient with the use of it.
Right. So with Richmond and the surrounding areas growing so fast, what are the fire department's plans for the future?
Our plans are to try to develop and keep our fire prevention programs growing and educating the public that how to stay fire safe. That's one thing, but also we do a lot of things kind of behind the scene with, we have what's called mutual aid agreements that if we do have a fire in our areas, that we don't rely just solely on our own fire department, that we get assistance from other fire departments. And I know in our general area, it'd be like Rosenberg or Sugar Land, in Pecan Grove, our close neighbors, we would use those initially. And if it's something to a large scale, then of course we'll reach out as far as Stafford, Missouri City, and further south, maybe even in El Campo, bringing other departments in or Wharton. We've had, not necessarily in our town, but we've assisted fire departments all around that multiple agencies there on bigger fires. So developing those mutual aid agreements, but also kind of training together. And as we know that Fort Bend County is one of the fastest growing counties in the nation. And with the density of the population growing and expansion in business and residential homes, the fire departments had kind of built like a coalition or as Chief Temple with Fort Bend EMS called it, stakeholders. So we realize we're stakeholders in the Fort Bend County area. So we are working together to make sure our policies, procedures, and our actions kind of mimic each other, and that we follow kind of a similar plan to protocol to meet these needs.
What can we do as a community to help?
I think one thing is to maybe try to get to know a little more about your fire departments and know how they operate. And what citizens do every day is the more they become educated, just like your program here, may be able, if it just touches one person that catches one thing that saves a home or a life, that serves all the purpose. So just becoming more aware, and you can, with technology today, you can go online and find ideas and tips of how to stay safer. But just know that, be aware, try not to be too distracted with things, and some of that is discipline. There's a lot going on, and it takes our attention away from some of the safety that we should be following. So as citizens, I say just try to be aware of those things out there. Check your smoke detectors at least once a year. I recommend twice a year, and then make sure your batteries are fresh and those things. And like you mentioned too, maybe installing those carbon monoxide detectors for those types of hazards as well. And we do really well with the schools. This year was a little bit of a challenge because normally we go to the schools and give our presentations. Well, we weren't doing face-to-face with anyone. So our team came up with videos and virtual activities that we shared on our website and with all the schools so they could still present those to the young ones. And we even also had those available for our senior living as too. And that's two of our most vulnerable categories for that hazard could take care of, befall them. So whenever those are available, a citizen sees it where they can watch or tune in to a fire safety message, just take the time to do it and share it with your whole family.
Can you give us your website address?
Yes, ma'am. I can give you our city website, and that's where we post a lot of our information. And it's www.richmondtx.gov. Pretty simple. You can go there and you can search around and find that. Or you can go to our Facebook site and just Google Richmond Fire Department Facebook, and it'll pull the link up. And we post things on that site as well. And I think you could even get alerts for things that are going on. It's not just hazards, but road conditions, and our police department's pretty good for having those things too. Those are good ways to try to stay in tune. But when things kind of lighten up a little bit, we'd really like to have you come visit our stations in person. But you can take station tours from searching our website and finding Fire Station Tour. And our personnel actually do a guided video tour of our stations and show how some of our operations work.
All right. Well, that sounds interesting. I want our listeners to really take time to go on the website and follow on Facebook, because we want these guys to be safe too. So let's not us be careless. Let's watch what we're doing and make sure that we do things safely. Is there anything else you want us to know?
Well, not really. I think we've summed it up, and your questions were great. They were right on point as to what I would have shared. But just know that when you're safe, when I say you, that's the citizens, we're safe. Because anytime we're put in harm's way, it's usually from some accident or something that's happened. And a lot of times they could have been avoided, but those things are going to happen. And so just stay as safe as you can. But if you have questions or anyone has questions, by all means, reach out to your local fire department. We are more willing to help and visit with you in a virtual means, at least for now, or share our information with all of our citizens to create a safer place to live, work, shop, and play, especially here in Fort Bend County.
I want to thank you and your team for keeping us safe, for being willing to walk into fires to save us, and doing all that you do for this community. I encourage our community, when you see a fireman out there, thank them. They're doing an awesome job for us, and they're keeping us safe, and we couldn't do it without them.
Well, we thank you for that. And, our gratitude goes to all caregivers, hospital workers, nurses, teachers, citizens, grocery store people. I mean, we've seen the pandemic kind of brought out the best in people, but it also kind of brought out some of the worst. But you see the people that are really dedicated in all fields that are really there to help. So it's enlightening, and it's we know when someone thanks us, we try to thank them back because we know they would do it for us.
Awesome. I want to thank you, Chief Youngblood, for joining us today, and a big thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Beginning now, set an intention and a relentless focus on living your life as the greatest person you can be in all situations. Please join us next week.
Thank you for joining us today on Oak Bend Medical Center Happy Hour podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's broadcast and invite you to email us at oakbendhappyhourpodcast@obmc.org with any questions or topics that you would like for us to cover. Remember, you can find us here each Friday at 5. Until next week, be mindful and stay healthy.